The tunnel in the forest in the quiet town of Windfall, where the worst anyone expected was the occasional missing animal or a small road accident. No one knew the true terror lurking in the shadows of the forest. There, far from the eyes of society, Jonathan Holloway, the town's most reclusive man, nurtured his own brand of evil. He lived in an isolated house, surrounded by dense woods, where the wind seemed to whisper secrets. The townspeople knew him only as an eccentric old man who never left his house except to make small trips to town. But in reality, Holloway wasn't simply isolating himself, he was preparing for his own hunt, constructing a maze of traps, a place where he could capture his victims and make them suffer as he pleased. Chapter 1. The heart of the forest. The people of Windfall had always been suspicious of Holloway, but no one knew the extent of the madness he harbored. He wasn't just an eccentric old man, as they thought. His obsession with hunting and human pain had been rooted in him since youth. Before hiding away in the forest, Holloway had been a skilled hunter, but his prey was never animals. The desire to hunt humans was born from a primal need for control. He wanted to feel the fear of his prey. He wanted to play with them, watch terror unfold before his eyes, and he knew exactly how to manipulate their minds. Holloway began planning his retreat years before moving to the isolated house. He found a remote clearing in the forest, where the echo of the trees blocked any sound from the outside world. But what made it even more dangerous was the tunnel he built, a subterranean maze that connected to various other caves, where he could take his victims without anyone knowing. The house was merely a facade for Holloway's true nature. Chapter 2. The path to perdition. The victims he chose were always people with some form of vulnerability. Men and women, young and old, all had something in common. They were loners, distant from their families, disconnected from the world. Holloway knew they would be the easiest to manipulate. Often, he would begin with a casual conversation in town, with sweet words that drew them to his secluded home. They never knew they were stepping into the domain of a hunter. One such victim was a young woman named Emily, who had recently moved to Windfall. She was a writer, seeking peace to finish her novel. Holloway approached her with the same tactic he always used: sympathy and attention. He invited her to see the view of the forest. Unaware of the true nature of the invitation, Emily accepted. She was never seen again. Holloway used a method he had perfected over the years. He never rushed the process. First, he kept her in one of his small hideouts, watching her, waiting for fear to settle in. Emily was kept in a makeshift cage, made of wire and branches, where darkness enveloped her constantly. Holloway never let her sleep, always forcing her to stay awake, listening to the sounds of other victims in distress. The torture was psychological, not physical. He wanted to break her spirit. He whispered in her ear, telling her stories about what would happen if she tried to escape. "The trees here know your fears, Emily," he would say, with a sinister smile, "and they can scream louder than you." Chapter 3. The game of the hunt. Holloway's method was never a direct hunt. He liked to play, making his victims feel the thrill of escape. He would release them into the forest, knowing they would be so lost that the sense of desperation would be inevitable. He never immediately hunted them down. He let them run, hide, and panic, desperate to find an escape. When the fear became unbearable, he would catch them. One of his deadliest traps was a network of fine wires, invisible to the naked eye, that spread throughout the forest. When his victims touched these wires, a disguised mechanism would pull a cord, trapping them on the ground. Many victims never understood what had happened until they were already caught. Cole, the police officer investigating the disappearances, was one such victim. He was tracking Holloway's trail in the forest when, without warning, he was snared in the trap. The worst part wasn't being caught, but the feeling of helplessness when he realized he was trapped in a hunter's snare. Holloway appeared shortly after, with a grin on his face, as though he had found an old friend. "You're good," Holloway said, analyzing Cole, "but not always the best. Let's see how you react." Cole was now immersed in Holloway's nightmare. The old man would only approach him to ask questions, to inquire about what the officer knew, what he wanted to understand. Cole's answers were never good enough for the old man, who continued to psychologically torment him. Chapter 4. The Reward of Pain. When Holloway captured a victim, he didn't kill them immediately. He enjoyed prolonging the pain, watching the suffering until their resistance broke. But what made him more insane was his ability to manipulate. He made his victims believe they could escape, but he always gave them false hopes. For some, he would offer a rusted blade and tell them that if they cut enough from one of the surrounding trees, they could create an escape. But he knew the blade wouldn't cut through anything thicker than a twig. What he wanted, in fact, was to see them crumble, trying futilely for an escape that would never happen. When Emily tried to cut the tree, Holloway watched her for days. She became so obsessed with the task that she lost all sense of reality. She cut until her hands bled, until the last ounce of energy was drained. When she finally gave up, Holloway appeared to free her, only to see her fall into yet another trap, where she was finally silenced. Chapter 5. Cole's test. Cole's situation worsened with each passing day. He never knew if he was being watched. The only thing he knew was that Holloway was always nearby, watching, waiting for the right moment to act. The old man enjoyed provoking, playing with his mind. One night, Holloway appeared before him with a serious expression. "You think you can catch me, officer? You think you can save the other victims?" He got closer and closer, until he was so near that Cole could feel his hot breath on his neck. "I like to see fear in people's eyes, but you interest me." Cole knew he was in a race against time. He couldn't wait for help to come. He knew the only way out was to face Holloway head-on. And the moment the old man brought the sharp blade close to his face, Cole reacted with a desperation-fueled strength, fighting like never before. Chapter 6. The Final Terror. When Cole finally managed to disarm Holloway and escape the trap, he thought the pursuit was over. But Holloway was not so easily defeated. The old man, though wounded, was still out there, somewhere in the darkness of the forest. And Cole knew he wouldn't give up so easily. With every step Cole took, he felt Holloway's eyes on him, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The hunter knew Cole was on the brink of collapse, and he fed off the officer's despair. When Cole finally reached the village, he was found in a state of shock, his eyes vacant, unable to speak of what had truly happened. Holloway was never found. He disappeared into the shadows of the forest, like a specter that vanishes. But his legend didn't die. Many say he is still there, somewhere among the trees and tunnels, waiting for his next victim. Those who dare enter the forest, especially at night, say they hear distant laughter, footsteps, and sometimes muffled screams. But no one ever finds the old man. They disappear just like Holloway's previous prey.